Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is the third episode in the series on Hijaz, and the focus of this episode is on the second Hajj, which happened with a limited audience, very limited number of pilgrims. So essentially, this was the second year when the Hajj was performed in seclusion. Last year, there were only 6,000 pilgrims allowed, and this year there were 60,000 pilgrims. Now, compare that to, on average, there were 22 million pilgrims coming for Hajj every year to Saudi Arabia in the last 20 years. And just to put this into further context, Hajj is an obligation on all Muslims. It is an obligation like none other. Allah has granted relaxation of this obligation on those who cannot attend due to resources or health. But if someone is healthy and has enough wealth to sustain the family for a year and still doesn't perform Hajj, his affair is very strict with Allah. It is narrated that such a person who is able to perform Hajj but doesn't performs it and dies, it is as if he died a non-Muslim. So with such strict criteria, all Muslims try their utmost to go to Hajj, to go to Makkah to perform Hajj. And then, as we have talked about before, Makkah is part of Hijaz, which is controlled by the Saud family. The ruler calls himself the custodian of the two holy mosques, one in Makkah and the other in Medina. Hence, it is their responsibility to facilitate Hajj for as many Muslims as possible in whatever circumstances there might be. But the fundamental question remains, are they meeting their basic responsibility of facilitating Hajj? And that is the question that we as Ummah should ask. And we as humans should ask. The Saudi government has been trying to increase the capacity of Hajj for decades. On average, 2 million people performed Hajj, as I mentioned earlier, every year for the last 20 years. But in the last 2 years, only 70,000, less than 70,000 Muslims performed Hajj. And these Muslims were all from within the kingdom. So foreign Muslims were not allowed at all to perform their religious duty. As a result, more than 3.9 million Muslims missed the opportunity and complete the religious obligation in 2020 and 2021. And again, I repeat the number. It's 3.9 million or 3,900,000 Muslims. What if a Muslim died without performing Hajj? What happens to his obligation? Who's answerable for that? I know and believe that Allah is the best judge of intention and will most likely forgive a person who died with the intention of going to Hajj and bless him with the blessings of performing Hajj. But what is the punishment of that person or institution who prohibited the pilgrimage? While Allah will surely judge them on the day of judgment, it is our responsibility to do three things. One, hold those goons accountable for prohibiting Muslims from entering the holy mosque to perform Hajj. Number two, they don't deserve to be called the custodians of the holy mosque and should be stripped of the title. Number three, Hijaz should be freed and become an independent state under the control of all Muslim countries so that the interests of all Muslims around the world are represented and not decided by the usurpers of that land. Some might argue that there is a health crisis right now, and that's why curtailing Hajj might be a good thing, and they could justify or support it with the narration of the Prophet. From when there is a plague in a city, a person should not enter or leave the city. Even with this, one could potentially argue that 2020 decision could be justified, or at least a person could argue at that time, even though at that time there were enough reasons to believe that social distancing was working and therefore the Hajj could have been performed even in 2020. But 2021 decision to limit Hajj to 60,000 pilgrims is total nonsense. It cannot be justified. I'll give you 7 reasons why. Number one, everyone knew that in 2021, Hajj will happen in mid July, and the vaccines were available in January, February of 2021. Now, some countries had already gotten vaccines in December. The Saudi government, which makes billions of dollars, and I'll talk about the economic of Hajj in the form of fees, taxes, economic activity, could have either sponsored the vaccination of Hajis or added the cost to every Hajj package, so that all the Hajis were vaccinated before coming to the Holy Land. The out of pocket cost of a Pfizer vaccine in a country like Pakistan or India is $40. Saudi government charges thousands of dollars for a Hajj package. Second, they could have done it, honestly, 2-3 months in advance. So in July, they could have started vaccinating, identifying the people, and vaccinated in March, April, May timeframe for the July Hajj. They could have restricted the Hajj to people under 45 who have a lower mortality rate, so that the old are protected. Number three, they could have quarantined people while coming into the country with thousands of open rooms available in Mecca, and people could have quarantined themselves while going back to their country. Number four, they could have created biosecure bubbles where Hajis went from hotel to haram for just the obligatory requirements and then close all the shops so there was no intervening things. It was just direct access. Number five, they could have done daily random tests to make sure things were going according to plan. Number six, they could have done 24/7 transportation between Mina and Makkah for final rituals. And number seven, I mean, honestly, they could have sent back Hajis within 7 days of coming into the country, because there's a time of incubation of the virus. So the Hajis would have gone back without spreading it, and that they could have put Hijaz in a biocontrol environment so that people were not going out of the holy places. In summary, the Saudi government had the financial means and reasonable time to plan a well orchestrated Hajj so that many more people could have come to Kaaba and pray to Allah and gain the blessings of Kaaba. But they did not show the willpower to think through this because they took Hajj and Kaaba lightly. They stopped hundreds of thousands of Muslims from coming to the Kaaba and performing their religious duties. This is even worse when you see that the country's malls remain open in the land of Saud. How can we then stay quiet and not raise voice against this blatant misuse of authority on a place which is shared by the entire Muslim Ummah, all the countries, and should be that way? Free Hijaz.